Hi guys, and welcome to another video where we will be tackling another medical issue that can occur with your geckos. Aren't I just a joy? However, it's always good to know about these things beforehand, so hopefully they can be avoided. So first of all, thank you to you for actually clicking on this video and wanting to learn about this. So today we're looking at floppy tail syndrome, and it's exactly what you think it looks like. A floppy tail. This seems to occur predominantly in captivity and mainly with arboreal species, notably crested geckos. So why or how does this occur? Now, to be honest, there's no concrete evidence for the cause of this. However, there are quite a few well-documented theories, so today I'm going to be going through them with you and you can decide. The most common theory, and possibly the most plausible, is a gecko being upside down for too long on glass walls of the tank. The reason being is this isn't necessarily natural, being on something so flat and constantly being in this position, whereas in the wild they'd have a variety of things to climb and lay on, so occasionally laying vertically downwards on a tree trunk wouldn't be so bad, as they can move on to other things as they wish. Personally, I do see my geckos hanging upside down on the glass occasionally, but they don't really stay there for long or sleep there. This usually occurs because they've been walking around the glass walls of their tank, and I've come in and turned on my room light and they just sort of freeze where they are. I think I have quite a bit of variety in the tanks. For example, they love to sleep in their cork hollows. They have branches and cork that go both vertically and horizontally, so in a way they're not forced to stay on the glass when they want to rest. So I definitely think it's good to look at your enclosure and see if there's any issues. I also have a coconut hide that I made, and Lyra will sleep in this almost every day. However, this wouldn't necessarily occur in the wild, and she does curl up in it, so I can't say to you guys, oh, 100% this is the best thing ever. But she does seem to love it. It doesn't mean she has to be forced onto the glass, and I'm sure in the wild they do naturally curl up like that sometimes. So why does this position affect their tail? Most people believe this is due to excessive weight being put on the pelvis area, which can make the tailbone and hips deformed. Another interesting theory around this theory is looking at wild crested geckos. Most wild adult crested geckos no longer have their tails due to stress and predation. So if this has happened for generations, maybe adult cresties were just not meant to keep their tails. What I mean by this is obviously being kept in captivity, they have the luxury of not being preyed upon, and they have a lot less stress in general. So combining that with the food on demand, sleeping vertically, face down, their heavy weight could put pressure on their tail, and this could contribute to this issue. However, if this were true, you'd think crested geckos wouldn't have evolved such a specialised tail if they were just meant to get rid of it all the time. Does that make sense? So I think I can see where the person's coming from with this theory, but I don't think it's 100% true. There is another theory. This one isn't as reliable as the others, but it's certainly somewhat plausible, and that is MBD, metabolic bone disease. The only problem with the MBD theory is this will usually affect the entire skeletal system, usually starting off with like a spongy jaw or bendy, disfigured legs, whereas a lot of reports of floppy tail syndrome actually only see issues in the tailbone and the pelvis. And the geckos that are affected are usually on diets that contain all the nutrients and minerals they require. And also on the x-rays, these geckos only show signs of problems in their pelvis and hips and tail, rather than their whole skeleton. However, this being said, as we're talking about metabolic bone disease, make sure you're providing the correct diets. Things like baby food, jelly pots, or just providing fresh fruit can lead to MBD. Of course, this will affect the tail, but also the rest of the body. There's also some suggestion that this could be genetic, and it is actually backed up a little bit. It's also highly debated on whether or not geckos that have FTS, floppy tail syndrome, should be bred with. Some people believe that continuing to breed geckos with the syndrome will only leave us with a lot more captive crested geckos with a lot more issues. So with that all in mind, what are the main symptoms to look out for? It is really as simple as the name, a floppy tail. You can actually see in these pictures, and the reason I use other people's photos for these kind of videos is thankfully this hasn't occurred to my geckos, but I will leave links to where I got these pictures from in the description down below. One other thing that has been noted is the muscles involved in the prehensile action of the tail aren't always involved with floppy tail syndrome, so your gecko may still be able to grip onto you out branches, but they may still have the syndrome. So if you think your gecko has floppy tail syndrome, what do? You got to go to the vets, and it's important to know that your general vet that mainly sees cats and dogs, they aren't usually trained in reptiles, and in some cases it can be the first time they're actually interacting with this species, so you may have to sort of guide them a little bit and ask for an x-ray. What I found was when I took Isla, my Crested Gecko, who you may have heard about her, I took her for an x-ray, and because obviously the geckos are fairly small, they could put her in a dog dental x-ray, and this actually worked out quite cheap. I mean, it's still about £30, but that is cheap compared to if you got like a dog x-ray. You know, that can be expensive. But by doing this x-ray, they can see the severity of your gecko's condition, whether it does in fact have MBD or floppy tail syndrome as suspected. If the case is quite bad and it's putting a lot of stress on your gecko's pelvis, the vet may suggest amputating the tail. Now, it may sound cheaper and easier to just pull it off at home, but I wouldn't suggest it, because given the condition of your gecko, it could just complicate things, and also your gecko may be kind of scared of you after that. Now, sadly, as far as we know, floppy tail syndrome is not reversible, and we cannot really tell for sure how much pain it causes a gecko. If a vet doesn't think it's worth removing the tail, as this may be the very early signs of this syndrome, and it may just have occurred to you that your setup probably isn't ideal, then you could always make some changes. This won't necessarily get rid of the syndrome at all, but it should make things a little more comfortable for your gecko. A Crested Gecko's tail is a pretty interesting thing. It has the same kind of sticky patch on the tip of it as it does on their feet, so it can almost be seen as a fifth limb. It also is able to detach as a defense mechanism. However, sadly for Crested Geckos, their awesome tail never grows back. So if your gecko still has its tail, make sure you take lots of care of it, make sure your tank is full of a variety of surfaces for your geckos to explore, and ensure their diet is correct. I really hope this video has helped. If you haven't already, please subscribe. But thank you very much for watching, guys, and goodbye.
Oh.